guys, this is Fred from Profile, and it is with great pride that we present you this interview with none other than Mr. Steven Wilson. How are you doing, sir?
I'm very good. Thank you very much for asking. Yeah, it's not the greatest time, is it? But you know, we're doing okay considering. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
The Future Bites will finally see the light of day on January 29th, an album that was originally planned to be released in June 2020. We understand some of the reasons, but in the meantime, we've seen dozens of artists releasing more material than usual. What was the key reasons to postpone the release so far away in the future?
I think originally it was really a question of tact because at the time when lockdown first was announced and when COVID-19 was first a real, global, catastrophe, I really worried about releasing an album that was essentially about living in a dystopian world right into the middle of that climate. And I wasn't really sure how it would be received. I'm still not. I'm still not. I think one of the things is that delaying the album from June last year to January now, no one, my management, my record company, and myself included, really thought we would still be in the midst of what we're going through now. I think we all thought, it's definitely going to be all over by then, isn't it? And here we are. And I don't know about you guys in Canada, but in England here, it's worse than ever. It's worse than ever. So, but I think there's been a change in the mood. The kind of shock of it has worn off. So people are not so shocked and disorientated by this. There's almost like a kind of resigned stoicism about it now. So I think it doesn't feel as wrong to be releasing an album like this now. In fact, you could argue that this album seems more timely and more topical right now than ever because of what we're going through.
Yeah. While To the Bone was about evolvement of human brain and in internet era, the theme surrounding the Future Bites is more about consumerism. Sorry for my French pronunciation. What made you choose to write about this topic versus any other? We know you're a music collector yourself, so does the subject matter relates to you as well?
I think it relates to everyone, particularly, those of us living in so-called first world countries. Consumerism has become such a kind of popular pastime. Again, particularly in living through the pandemic for the last 9 months. People have been doing a lot more shopping perhaps than even they would normally, and myself included, So personal shopping, it was written in 2018, so it was written long before the pandemic, but it's really, for me, it's halfway between being a love letter to consumerism. As you can see, I love to buy records, CDs, clothes, Blu-rays, DVDs, whatever you name. I love to buy those things. And I'm a collector as well, as you kind of pointed out. I'm a bit of a musical obsessive myself. So I love shopping, and so I think part of personal shopping and the theme behind the record was about just, being very affectionate towards the idea of shopping. But there's the other side to it, which is the more insidious side of modern e-commerce, which is that we now live in a world where algorithms are constantly analyzing our internet footprint, and companies are using that data almost against us to persuade us to buy. And this is the point, to buy things that we really don't need. And part of the fun of buying is, of course, buying something you don't need. One of the things that Elton John mentions in the song is deluxe edition box sets. I'm sure you've bought a few of those yourself, and I've bought a few too. In fact, I've been involved.
All of yours.
Right. Okay. There you go. And I was just going to say, I've been involved in a whole bunch of them too. But there's also the other way of looking at the deluxe edition box set, which is it's really something that is more about the ownership and the status of owning it rather than it is about the utility. Most of those box sets are full of things you don't need. You don't need to hear the 20 songs that weren't considered good enough to be released the first time around. You don't need to hear the demos or the alternative take, the alternative mix where the hi-hat's slightly over to the right-hand side of the step. You don't need to hear that shit, you know? You don't need to hear the 7-inch edit that only came out in Portugal for a week, you know? You don't need to hear that stuff, but it's kind of fun. It's fun to own those things. It's like you're ticking boxes. Yeah, got that, got that, got that, got that. But it's true to say that the world of consumerism moves more and more towards the purchase of things that are more about ownership than it is about the actual use that they have to us in our lives. And that's fun. I'm not saying it's not. But there is also the darker side of that too. And then the other theme on the album, which kind of connects with the idea of consumerism, is the idea of how self and identity has changed in the age of social media. So whereas we used to be a species that would gaze up at the stars and look out at the world with curiosity, now we spend most of our time looking at that to see how many likes we've got on Instagram, how many comments we've got on Facebook, and how many views we've got on YouTube. And I do the same. I do the same. And obviously, I don't think that's a particularly great step in the evolution of the human species. And so a lot of the album is about how self-obsession, how we become more narcissistic as a species because of things like social media. And the other terrifying aspect to that is I think that this technology is still in its very infancy. So it's only going to get more and more powerful and more insidious in our lives. And eventually that kind of prophecy that the great science fiction writers of the 20th century made, that one day artificial intelligence would enslave us, is actually happening. It's just not happening in the way they thought. They thought it would be robots like Arnold Schwarzenegger, but it's not that. It's this. This is what's enslaving us. Social media and the internet.
Yeah, soon you won't have to leave your house. Like, I mean, you can order your food nowadays on the net. So,
well, you already don't. You don't need to leave your house, which in a way has been a blessing during the last year. I mean, it's been amazing. I mean, imagine if lockdown had happened 30 years ago. I can't imagine how we would have possibly got through it. But now, luckily, we can shop for food and we can do almost everything online. So thank goodness for that. But there is the more insidious side of the internet and technology, which is kind of what I'm more concerned with on the Future Bites.
Good topic. I'm not sure if you're the type of person who read critiques. You're free to do whatever you want, you know, the music that you want, and we're free to enjoy it or not, right? Your new album, I really enjoyed, like really. You've released a few singles, and since everyone who comment on social networks, they're Mr. Know-It-All, are you somewhat worried that some of your longtime progressive rock fan base will be kind of alienated by the new direction you've taken?
This is a complex subject. I mean, I feel that what you've just described in a way is a constant throughout my career anyway.
Yeah.
I remember years ago when Porcupine Tree suddenly adopted metal as a big part of our musical vocabulary, how much hate there was from the old fans. I remember going solo, and, you know, I think my only real allegiance and loyalty, and this sounds very selfish, but I do believe this is fundamental with anyone that considers themselves to be an artist with some integrity. My only real allegiance and loyalty is to excite myself with what I'm doing. And I have never, and I'm sure everyone must know this surely by now, because I say it till I'm blue in the face, I have never thought of myself as a generic artist.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not to say that I don't acknowledge I have made albums in the tradition of progressive rock. And in fact, those albums have tended to be the most successful of my career. But I started out in a synth pop group called No Man. I've spent years making ambient music as Bass Communion. I have all the time alongside this career, supposedly making quote unquote progressive rock, I have been continuing to do other things. And even in some of those progressive rock records, like on Hand Cannot Erase, a track like Perfect Life is an electronic piece, you know. So I think this idea that I'm somehow a generic artist and I have to be loyal to the idea of progressive rock, which by the way is not something I've ever called myself.
No, I know. Yeah.
I don't like that idea that I would paint myself into a corner. And I think this album is kind of testament to that. You know, it's, to me, it's an album that sounds like a completely natural evolution for me to have made a record like this. It sounds completely like me. I mean, it sounds like a Stephen Wilson record. The musical vocabulary has changed slightly. It has less of the classic rock tropes. It is more about contemporary electronic sound. But if you forget all that, it sounds exactly like every other record I've made in some ways. You know, obviously it's different, but you see what I'm getting at. It still has the same conceptual kind of scope. It's as ambitious, sophisticated as anything I've done. Lyrically, it's just as dark as anything I've done. But what it isn't is it's not a classic rock album. The musical language has changed on this record. I think most people, so-called progressive rock fans included, are actually pretty open-minded. And are just as happy to go and listen to an ABBA album, a Beatles album, a Radiohead album, you know, whatever it is, whatever they listen to. And I think those people will absolutely enjoy this record very much. The people who honestly would rather listen, and I speak about a very small minority here, and I don't mean to be derogatory, but I'm going to be anyway. The people who would rather listen to third-rate progressive rock than first-rate music in another genre, I have no time for. I have no time for those people. I don't understand that, why you would prefer to listen to a bad progressive rock band than an amazing pop group or an amazing jazz record.
Oh.
And I've met a few of those people, but they are a minority. But those are the people that scream the loudest on social media. Yeah. They scream the loudest on social media because they have that sense of entitlement and snobbishness about the world. And I understand why, because progressive rock has been marginalized by the mainstream for so long that the people who love it almost feel evangelistic about it. And they feel that when someone like me makes a record that has, you know, a pop sensibility to it, that is somehow a betrayal. And I have come across that mentality throughout my career from time to time, but I can't really engage with those people. I don't make music with that sort of mindset.
Yeah. And it's normally those people who are stuck in the early 70s, like, you know, they want to hear the Genesis, the old Genesis music, the old Pink Floyd music, the old Yes music. You know, like if you're open-minded, then, you know, like my last comment on Facebook, you know, it was a topic about your new album and the singles. Some people were saying, well, it's pop. I don't like pop. Well, my answer was, if this is pop, it's damn good pop. And that's going to make me want to listen to more pop music, because this is something else. I mean, this is not just the typical pop, simple pop music. To me, it's so much more, you know, sophisticated, like you said.
I mean, a couple of things I would say about that. Just, we should probably move on, otherwise we could talk about this all day, couldn't we? But a couple of things just to say about that. I think, firstly, the idea of pop as a derogatory term is also something that a very small minority of people latch onto. I've never thought of pop as anything other than a magical, glorious thing when it's done properly. The Beatles are the ultimate pop group.
Oh, yeah.
And if anyone tells me they don't like the Beatles, I don't believe them. Everyone loves the Beatles. Everyone loves ABBA at the end of the day too. Pop, glorious pop is one of the finest, you know, art forms I think you can create. Pop as in popular music which is accessible, universal. There's no reason why it can't still be ambitious and sophisticated. So I embrace that. But the last thing I'll say about this, I don't mind if someone says to me, this is pop music and I don't like pop music. That's fine. But I don't like it when they say, because of that, it's somehow bad music.
Yeah.
That's the problem I have. So I think, going back to your very first point, Fred, I am quite prepared to lose some fans over this record, but I don't mind as long as they say, it's not for me, I understand what he's doing. It's not my kind of thing. But if they say it's bad music because it's pop music and it's not serious prog rock, those are the people I can't engage with. Those people.
Yeah.
Okay.
We know you don't like to do, you know, the same album twice. You've said that many times. But as far as writing like Porcupine Tree or early Steven Wilson's type of music, do you put like a big X on exploring that music genre again? Like, or like, is it totally over?
No, not at all. You know, I think what I always say to people is when you least expect me to do something, that's probably when I'll do it. So, I mean, you know, I've always said Porcupine Tree, I can imagine we'll probably make another record one day. I don't know when. We'll probably do it at the moment that everyone's least expecting it, you know. So, listen, I still love so-called progressive rock. I'm not there right now, honestly. I'm not there right now. I'm more excited by other music right now. But one thing I know from my past is that I go through cycles with things. Yeah. Pink Floyd will always be my favorite group, always have been, always will be. My relationship with other progressive rock kind of waxes and wanes, you know. I could easily be excited by something like that again. And, you know, The Raven, when I made The Raven, nice t-shirt, by the way, when I made The Raven, Refused to Sing 7 years ago now, I think that was me saying, you know what, I'd like to try and do a record in this genre, and I'd like to try and do it as well as anyone has ever done it, you know, at least aim for that, and try and make a really, you know, a classic, old school, progressive, conceptual rock record that stands up with the very best. Now, I don't know whether I achieved it or not, but that was my shot at that. And I enjoyed doing that, but then it was like, okay, done that, now what? You know, what can I do next? And Hand Cannot Erase was next, which was the next logical step. And you know, I guess I'm very fickle in that sense. I can't have an allegiance to doing anything for very long because I get bored. And I think, to me, the kind of icons that I grew up admiring the most, people like Bowie, Zappa, Neil Young, were always changing. You know, that's what they did. Even filmmakers like Stanley Kubrick, who almost never made a film in the same genre twice, you know. 2001, the greatest science fiction movie of all time, and then a period drama, and then The Shining, a horror movie, and then Full Metal Jacket, a Vietnam movie. And that sort of thing happens more in the world of cinema than it does in music. It's unusual in music to hop around genres as much as that. But the people that do, and the people that did and define their own musical world, I mean, I have much more admiration for Peter Gabriel as a solo artist than I ever did for Genesis personally, because I think he became a truly great iconoclast when he kind of threw off the shackles of genre-based music. So, but that's just my opinion, you know.
It's good reference, yeah. Has the change in style made you pick different musicians to work with, or could you rely mostly on the same people you've worked in the past?
It's funny, this record is actually the most solo record I've made probably since the early days of Porcupine Tree, when those records were entirely played by me, performed by me. And this is almost been a return to that. I played all the guitar myself. I played most of the bass, most of the keyboards. There's a bunch of backing singers on the record, and there's a drummer or two on the record. But otherwise, it's mostly me. And I don't think that was necessarily a conscious decision. I just didn't need, for this particular approach to the music, I didn't need great players. In fact, I almost wanted to get away from musos. I wanted to get away from the tropes of classic rock soloing and clever drums. I wanted something that was more edgy, more contemporary and fresher. And I found that within myself, shall we say.
Yep. Do you think this could lead to collaboration with other artists with whom you haven't worked before? Like, can we expect new projects, for example?
So I really hope so. I mean, I love one of the other sort of consistent things throughout my career has been collaboration, you know. Yeah. I love to collaborate, you know, and there are many people that would be on my wish list of people I would love to collaborate with. So who knows? Yeah, absolutely. Let's see what happens.
Yeah. I was very impressed, like everybody else, to hear Elton John's voice on Personal Shopper. Getting that phone call from Elton, how did you react? Like, how does that discussion go? Like, I know, like we read a lot of stuff about your collaboration with Elton, but that phone call, it must have been something special.
It was pretty surreal. It was pretty surreal to answer the phone and for a voice on the other, a voice that everyone knows, to
Yep.
say, "Hi, Steve, this is Elton John. I fucking love your track. Let's do it." It was insane, you know, and then to have a lovely conversation with him and to understand how engaged he was with the whole idea. You know, he loved the idea. He understood it was kind of sending himself up in a way, but in a very affectionate way. And I definitely lapsed into fanboy mode, you know, throughout that conversation. And it wasn't the only conversation. We had many conversations during the, you know, I mean, he was so, you know, committed to making sure he did a good job. And he rang me about 5 times the day he sent it over. And, "Are you okay with it? Do you want me to change anything? Do you want me to do anything again?" And a lot of people have said to me actually that Elton is kind of known as someone that's still very passionate about music. He still buys a lot of new music. I said to him a couple of months ago, I said to him, "Do you want me to send you a copy of the deluxe edition box set?" And he said, "No, don't worry, I've already ordered it." And he's already ordered. You know, bless him. Such a, you know, a nice, sweet guy, and one of the great songwriters and one of the greatest artists of all. So I'm very proud to have several of my great idols now are in my contacts list on my phone. So I sometimes when I get depressed, I look at that and think, well, you know what? You've got Elton in your phone book, and you've got David Gilmour in your phone book, and you've got this and that. So, you know, it cheers me up sometimes to know that Elton's my buddy.
It's great. Great stuff.
Yeah.
You're known to keep yourself extremely busy with everything related to music. Since March of last year, life has drastically changed, as we all know it. How did this affect you in your working rate? Like, has it made you available to try different things, like resting, for example?
Resting, no. What does that mean? Well, firstly, the answer to your question is yes. The things that I chose to do in lockdown were not the things I would normally expect to be doing. But they weren't necessarily to do with making more music. For example, I started a podcast with Tim Bowness, my partner from No Man. We've had a lot of fun recording this podcast called The Album Years, which is, we just basically argue about music. And it's been a big success and people really like it. So we're going to carry on with those. And the other, actually, I think the main thing I started working on a book. And it's a book about music. It's not an autobiography, at least it's not a conventional autobiography. It's more a book of ideas about music. So, for example, I do talk a lot about some of the things we've talked about here, this idea of not listening within genre, being someone who's very open-minded and you know, open to other kinds of music. I talk about my relationship with my fans, which is also something we've touched upon. I write a whole chapter about that, good and the bad side of how, you know, my dynamic with my fans works. There's even a short story or two, and there is some autobiographies too. But it's really just a book about anything that I thought might interest people, any subject I thought might interest people, anything I thought maybe I had a unique perspective on. And I've signed a publishing deal for that to come out in the summer. So that's still about 2/3 of the way through writing it. So that's been the big project in lockdown, I would say. Yeah.
Looking forward to it. Absolutely. And that podcast, where do we access it from?
So it's on all the usual platforms, Apple, you know, Podbean, Spotify. It's called The Album Years. It's called The Album Years. There's been about 14 episodes, I think, so far. And the whole concept of that is each episode is dedicated to a particular year, one year in the history of music. We dot around, we'll do a 90s year, then a 70s year, then a 80s. And we try to focus on records that are not part of the regular canon of classic records. So, for example, when we did 1973, we barely talked about Dark Side of the Moon. When we did 1967, we deliberately didn't talk about Sgt. Pepper. So it's trying to talk about the records that perhaps are a little bit more under the cover or off the radar,
Yep.
and turn people onto things that perhaps they may not know from those years, and always put those things into the context of what else was going on in that particular year. It's a lot of fun.
Cool. You miss touring?
I haven't missed touring. I think partly because I got married about 18 months ago, and I inherited two
Congratulations.
stepchildren. Thank you. I inherited two stepchildren. So I've been really enjoying being a homeboy and spending time with my family and doing those other things like writing the book and the podcast and various remix projects I've been involved in. But I'm beginning to miss it. I'm beginning to feel a bit itchy now, that particularly now the album is about to come out, and I had so many great, I still have so many great ideas of how to present the album in a live context, and I'm getting itchy to do it. So I'm really keeping my fingers crossed that towards the end of this year, I'll be able to go out on the road.
Looking back at your career spanning nearly 30 years, are you satisfied with who is Steven Wilson today as an artist?
I think so. It's a good question. I mean, I still feel I get better, and it's interesting because I reflect on, very often I find myself reflecting on the careers of some of the other great musicians I really love, and a lot of them you think, well, actually they produce most of their really important, great work in their 20s and early 30s, and for a lot of people, take someone like Jimmy Page, for example. Jimmy Page created the whole Led Zeppelin catalogue by the time he was 32, and then pretty much spent the rest of his career curating that catalogue and kind of reliving those glory years through, various other sort of projects that were kind of a spin-off from that. And here am I'm thinking the stuff I did when I'm in my 20s and 30s, I don't think is that good. I think I started to make really good records maybe when I became 30, records like Stupid Dream and In Absentia with the first records I can say, yeah, that's a really good record. I'm really proud of that one. And I feel like I've just carried on getting better, or at least evolving as an artist, and albums like Hand Cannot Erase for me, real, sort of landmark record, which I made when I was 40, whatever it was, 48 years old. And again, The Future Bites, I'm releasing it at the age of 53. And I feel it's like one of my best works. And so I guess in that sense, I feel like I'm still getting better, still evolving, still developing as a musician. I have to be happy with where I am in terms of being able to be pretty much completely selfish about the way I go about my art, and at the same time being very fortunate that there's still an audience for what I do. In fact, the audience is growing all the time. And I do work very hard. I work very hard to promote the records. I'm always happy to go out and talk to people and promote it any way I can, as aggressively as I can, because I believe that if I've spent so much time making a record I believe in, I should try and reach as many people as I can with it. And I'm still of that mindset. I still work very hard promoting. But the records themselves are made in a completely selfish way. I don't think about what my listeners expect or what they want. And I understand that is a very privileged and unusual situation to be in, where I can be that way and yet still sell a lot of records and a lot of tickets. So I have to be very pleased, even though obviously, if you ask me, yes, I would like to be a little bit more well known in the mainstream. I would love to be, contemporary of Tom York or Trent Reznor, someone as well known as that, but I'm not. And I can't change that. But at least I can say my career has been one conducted largely with integrity.
Wow. Very, very nice. We all know life isn't easy for artists. Music doesn't sell as much as it used to, but to promote a new album, thinking outside the box, do you have any plans to do live streaming shows, or do you have any other ways of reaching your audience?
Well, I've done for the last few months, I've done something called the Future Bites sessions online,
very nice.
Is where I basically just go to my studio and pick a song from my back catalogue or from the new album, or even a cover song. And I try to pick things that people haven't heard me play live 100 times. So you won't see me doing Trains in the Future Bites sessions, but you will see me picking, you know, more, shall we say, deep cuts from my back catalogue and doing new versions of them. So that's been a kind of alternative to being able to play live or being on TV or any of those things. And yes, I think you're right. You know, you're right that we're in a world now where you have to think about other ways to reach people, to engage with people, as a substitute for not being able to, not only not playing live, but not being able to go and do record store signings and those kind of things, where I would also have an opportunity to meet with fans and meet with my listeners. I don't like the word fan. It always sounds a bit patronizing, doesn't it? Listeners, meet with my listeners. And that's been one way I've found to engage with fans and listeners, and also doing Q&As online. I've done a few of those over the last couple of months, which is nice. Appearing on podcasts and things like those, talking about the record and music in general. So it's definitely a changed world, particularly for someone like me releasing a new album into the world. You kind of have to find new ways, certainly, to get people interested.
Absolutely. Few more minutes, Stephen. Before I let you go, we at Profile Prog, we like to ask few questions that only require one or a few word answers. Are you up for it?
I'll try. Yeah, I'll try. Yeah.
The one vinyl missing in your collection?
Godley and Cream's Consequences. I've been looking for a good condition copy of that for so many years, and it's so hard to find one in good condition. Godley and Cream Consequences. Yeah.
Wow. The concert you performed and enjoyed the most?
The 3 nights I did at the Royal Albert Hall in 2018 are a very, very special memory for me.
I wish I was there.
Yeah.
Any country or a city you would like to play but haven't?
Iceland, Reykjavik in Iceland, which I hear is an amazing place, and probably I've never been to Hong Kong. I'd love to go to Hong Kong and play. Yeah.
Any rituals or habits before a concert?
No, I don't actually know. Sorry.
If you could only pick one between Genesis, The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, Chick Corea, Light Years, or ABBA, the album, which one would it be?
ABBA, the album. I'm sorry, I'm not a fan of Genesis. I know that's almost heretical to say on a progressive rock.
That's good.
Not a fan of Genesis. I've never have been. Peter Gabriel, genius. I love some of Steve's solo records. Never quite understood Genesis. ABBA, on the other hand, ever since I was a kid, I have been obsessive ABBA fan. So that's easy, that one.
Can you suggest a new artist that we may not have heard of?
I'm a big fan of the new generation of neoclassical musicians, people like Max Richter, Nils Fromm, Johan Johansson. People I think will have heard some of their soundtrack work because it pops up in a lot of movies. They're kind of musicians in the classical tradition, but they've also grown up with electronic music. So there's a kind of push and pull between the world of electronic music and great symphonic classical music. Max Richter, probably my favorite. Max Richter, yeah. Okay.
Dead or alive, one artist you would love to perform with?
I'm going to cheat and give you two. Kate Bush, alive. Prince, dead.
Type of food you totally dislike?
Mushrooms and olives are Satan's spawn to me. Can't stand them. Mushrooms and olives.
And then probably an easy one for you. Are you more into dogs or cats?
Dogs, yeah. Love all animals, but dogs, yeah.
Stephen, thank you so much for accepting the invite. It was a huge honor for us at Profile Prog doing this interview today. It was a gift.
My pleasure, Fred. It's been a joy speaking to you too. Thanks very much. Thanks for the support. And hello to
Always.
everyone. Okay.
Cheers.
Cheers. Bye now. Bye.